Hello, fourth grade. Here's the exciting conclusion to our story that we've been reading. It's taken us a little while, but we will finish it. And Halloween just ended a few days ago anyway. The best Halloween ever. Chapter 9. Attention, please. Everyone jumped, but it was only Mr. Crabtree on the PA system. Will the following boys and girls join your parents in the front of the office on the first floor? Missy Reed, Joey Marks, Elliot, and Andrew Baker. Jillian Anthony, Freddie Adams, thank you. There were the usual crackles on the PA system, and then we could hear the school secretary whispering, and there's more. Wanda Ruggles and the Quincy boy and Mrs. Walker can't find Robert, and the Linkers can't find Gretchen. It sounded as if most of the first grade was missing somewhere in Woodrow Wilson School. And if this was true, it was the only interesting thing that had happened all evening. Not just the younger kids, the secretary was saying, Eddie O'Brien too, and Danny Filas, and Junior Jacobs. Danny, Junior? They were in our class. There were more crackles, and a little bits of what other people were saying. The secretary, Mr. Crabtree, parents, left him at the mystery swamp, saw him with some ghost, brought her little sister, and now she can't find her. At this, Luella grabbed Howard out of his stroller as if she thought he might just suddenly decide to get up and follow the crowd. Call the police? Here in the school? Top to bottom? There was a loud clunk and no more news on the PA system. We all looked at one another, and everyone was thinking the same thing. Was this it? The curse of the Herdmans? Any place will be safer, Imogene had said, than Woodrow Wilson School tonight. I looked around for Alice to see if she remembered anything else about the conversation. Had Imogene said something that I didn't hear, like, don't bother to do your homework, you won't need it after tonight? But Alice had left, still looking for an outlet, and we could hear all her ornaments clicking and clanking as she went down the hall. The scarecrow was gone too, but he or she, depending on which teacher it was, had probably gone to the office to find out what was happening. I knew it, Joanne squeaked. I knew this would happen. And somehow they knew it would happen, and that's why they're not here. You know what Imogene said. Everyone knew what Imogene said. Any place will be safer. And the PA system isn't working, so we don't know who else is missing. Joanne went on, so you better hang on to your little brother, Luella. Luella didn't need to be told that. She was holding Howard so tight around his middle that he was all folded over. If he'd had anything to say about it, he'd probably rather be missing than be halfway upside down. It was Joanne's idea for all of us to stay together, so if we disappeared, I guess we'd have company at our own age instead of all the first graders. And naturally, it was Albert's idea for us to hang out near the cider and donuts, before they're all gone, he said. Remember the spring concert? All those refreshments disappeared after Leroy Herdman set off the fire alarm in the middle of Alice Wendelken's piano solo. Of course, everybody had to vacate the building, and of course there wasn't any fire, and of course there weren't any refreshments left when everyone got back. No more piano solo either, though, which was good news for everyone except Alice and her mother. It wasn't unusual for food to disappear when the Herdmans were around, but it would be unusual now for 17 dozen donuts to disappear when they weren't around, so I didn't think Albert had anything to worry about. I didn't think I had anything to worry about either till Howard's stroller got caught on something, and the something turned out to be my mother's slipcover with all its safety pins and eye holes. I remember what Cecil had said. If something happens and I have to get out of the slipcover in a hurry, can I just leave it there? I must have said yes, because here it was. You must have said yes, Luella echoed. But why would they get out of their costume? I couldn't understand this because they wanted to be in the costume parade and maybe win the prize. I was even supposed to find them and be sure they were still all pinned together. Maybe they saw Albert in his laundry basket, Luella said, and figured he'd win the costume prize. Maybe they just got discouraged, or maybe, like Cecil said, something happened, and then she added, to them. Normally I would have said, come on, Luella, what's going to happen to my brother that hasn't already happened to him? He's been painted green, wallpapered, stuck in a revolving door. Normally I would have figured that Charlie just fell out of his costume somehow. But I didn't have a chance to say anything, because at that very minute, all the lights went out, leaving Woodrow Wilson School as black as the Halloween night outside. Chapter 10. At any other time, it wouldn't matter if the lights went out at Woodrow Wilson School. For one thing, we probably wouldn't be there if it happened at night. And when it had happened, once in the daytime, Mrs. Hazelwood turned it into a lesson about energy sources, and we had to draw wiring diagrams for extra credit. But now, on Halloween night, I knew this would happen, Joanne said again. But of course she didn't know this would happen. She didn't even know what had happened. Nobody knew what had happened except Donald Sycamore, because Donald was the only person around when Alice finally found an outlet and plugged herself in. Donald said later it was very exciting, just like the 4th of July. There was this loud crack and lot of sparks, and Alice yelled and the lights went out. Alice wasn't hurt, but for a long time she claimed to have loose electricity in her fingers, and she wouldn't turn anything on or plug anything in because of it. In the meantime, though, everyone was stumbling around in the dark. Normally, when something unexpected happened, Mr. Crabtree would get on the PA system and tell us all about it. The big red stain on the lunchroom floor was ketchup, not blood. The kindergarten slide was missing from the playground, and the kindergarten kids were not allowed to use the big slide. Today's scheduled fire drill will be postponed till next Tuesday. Why do you think he'll tell us about this? Joanne's voice came out of the darkness. Probably tell us the lights are out, Stuart said. Excuse me. No, he won't, Boomer sounded funny. He can't tell us anything, remember? The PA system's broken. Then what's that? Llewellyn said after a second. I had heard it too, a low, drawn-out whistle like wind through a loose window. But there was no wind here and no loose window. I can't see anything, Joanne said. I don't even know where we are. I don't even know who we are, Luella whispered to me, because listen, Howard Stroller is gone. It was right here and now it's gone. Who took Howard Stroller? She raised her voice. Who took Howard Stroller? Not me, someone said, just like that. Me. Don't fool around, Boomer, Luella said. I have to find Howard Stroller. I'm not fooling around, Boomer said. I don't know who that was. It wasn't me. It also wasn't Albert or Stuart or Joanne or Maxine or me, so we didn't hang around there or wherever there was. Joanne was right. Everything seemed different with all the lights out and no way to tell one room from another. But who was it, Luella said, as we picked our way down the dark hall, bumping into what we hoped was each other. And where is Howard Stroller? I didn't know who it was, but I did know that we'd better find Howard Stroller in a hurry, or I'd have to help Luella carry him, and Howard was a lump. We headed for Voices because we weren't the only people temporarily lost in Woodrow Wilson School. Everywhere there were kids and parents hollowing for other kids and parents. Jolene, Gloria, Wayne, where are you? Boyd, Liggett, you come here to me by the office. And Mr. Crabtree was yelling, lights, lights, as if just yelling about them would turn them on somehow. We did see a little flicker of light way at the end of the hall, like a flashlight, Boomer said. Austin Hubert had a flashlight because he's a floor lamp. Hey, Austin, he called, wait up. But the light bobbed up and down and back and forth and then went out. Maybe Austin didn't hear us, I thought, or maybe it wasn't Austin. Maybe it was who or what? Something brushed against my head, one of the cardboard bats, and then Luella squealed. Oh, there goes Howard! Of course he didn't go far, and he didn't seem to mind being dropped on the floor, but I had to feel around a little bit, so I wouldn't pick him up by one leg or something, and by accident I grabbed Joanne, who also squealed. It's me, I said, it's just me. How am I supposed to know that, she groaned. You could be anybody or anything. I'm going to sit down on the floor and stay right here till the lights come on. Somebody has to stay with me. I had the perfect person, Howard, but before I could hand him off to Joanne, we had heard someone yelling above all the other noise. It's alive! The whole cauldron is alive with worms! And that somebody was my mother. Chapter 11. When we got to her, Mother had calmed down. By now, some people had flashlights, so I could see that her witch hat was bent in the middle and hanging down over her face. She looked a little cross-eyed, especially up close when she hugged me. It isn't worms, she said. At least it isn't all worms. I think it's some worms and a lot of cold spaghetti. I don't know how it all got into the boiling cauldron. Boiling cauldron, huh? Boiling with squirmy worms. Anyway, she went on, I only left for a minute to see if I could find you and Charlie, and when I came back, ugh! I thought you were in charge of the mystery maze, I said. Not after some cat showed up and all but tore the whole thing down. scratching and squalling and leaving its fur everywhere. Not even its own fur. Somebody had painted it black for Halloween, I guess. And she leaned closer. Goodness, I wish they'd get the lights back on. I can't see who's with you. Well, I said, Howard's with me, and Luella, Boomer, and Maxine. Not Charlie, Mother said, or Cecil? Have you seen them, him, it? She was pretty upset, so I just said yes, which wasn't really a lie because I had seen it, the lion costume. The mother said I should go get them, since I knew where they were. They may not still be there, I said. Oh, they won't go roaming around in the dark, she said, especially not in a slipcover and a floor mop. You don't know where they are, Luella said as we left. This was true, but I knew where the slipcover and the floor mop were. In the downstairs hall by the teacher's room, which is where we all went, leaving my mother to deal with her wormy spaghetti. By now our eyes had begun to adjust to the darkness, but even so, Joanne said, everything is still spooky. The hall to the teacher's room was more than spooky, it was deserted. That's because there's nothing special set up here, Stuart said. No haunted hall or monster's mansion, just the teacher's room. I've never been in the teacher's room, he added. What do they keep in there? Kids, I said, according to Imogene Herdman. That was what Imogene told Charlie, that if kids went in the teacher's room, they never got out again. The teachers keep them in there, Imogene said, with little bowls of water and old bologna sandwiches. Come on, Stuart said. What do they do in there? Ask Leroy, Luella said. According to him, they hang out, watch TV, drink beer, order in pizza. I don't know what they do. I've never been in there. Me either, Albert said. I never got invited. Albert, I said, nobody gets invited to the teacher's room. Sometimes you get sent there with a note for someone, but even then they don't let you in. I got sent there once in the 2nd grade, Maxine said, with a note from Mrs. Campbell. I didn't even know who Mrs. Campbell was, and I was so nervous I got a nosebleed. She stopped at the door. I'm not even sure I want to go in there now. I didn't know whether Maxine was scared in case Imogene was right, and there was something, excuse me, there was something in the teacher's room to be scared of, or whether she was just remembering her nosebleed and wondering if it would always happen when she went to the teacher's room. There's just tables and chairs, Boomer reported from inside the room. No TV or anything good. But there's somebody in here. And his voice faded out or down or away. Oh, excuse me. Sounds like he fell in a hole, Luella said. And then I remembered what Ellis had told me about the teacher's room. I think he did, I said. As usual, Alice was right. There was a hole in the floor, and Boomer was at the bottom of the hole along with Danny and Junior and a lot of 1st grade kids, and Charlie's here. We're in the boiler room, Cecil chimed in, but we took off our costume before we slid down and left it. Slid down? Suddenly the lights came on again, and we could see the hole, and inside it the missing kindergarten slide. And down at the bottom, what's down there, Albert said. It looks like candy, Charlie whooped. Halloween candy. The whole boiler room is full of Halloween candy. I think it's, he was so excited he began to stutter. I think it's all the candy in the world. Chapter 12. That's what it looked like. Wall-to-wall candy, big piles of candy, the floor covered with candy, all kinds, all colors, all wrapped, a giant trick-or-treat supply for the rest of your life. Milk Duds, Sugar Babies, Pez, Milky Way, Snickers, Dum-Dums, Three Musketeers, Hershey bars, Swedish Fish, Jujubes, Kit Kats, Twizzlers, Crunch Bars, Twix, Tootsie Rolls, Mounds Bars, Starburst, Smarties, Reese's Pieces, M&M's, Reese's Peanut Butter Cups, Payday Bars, Almond Joy, Baby Ruth, Fifth Avenue, Mr. Goodbar, Rolos, Butterfingers, Carmelo, Candy Dots, Hershey Kisses, Score Bars, Licorice Whips, Heath Bars, Raisinets, Mallow Cups, Charleston Chew, Chunkies, Clark Bars, Crackle Whoppers, Sugar Daddies, Oh Henry, Bit of Honey, Dove Bar, Goobers, Snow Caps, Junior Mints. We had all come down the kindergarten slide, even Albert in his laundry basket, and Luella holding Howard, so it was pretty crowded in the boiler room with all of us and all the missing kids. Anyone who had pockets in their costume was stuffing them with candy, and anybody who didn't was welcome, Albert said, to borrow part of his laundry basket. That's really nice of you, Albert, I said. You don't have to do that. Yes, I do, he said. If I took all the candy for myself, I'd have to go to Fat Cap again this summer. I wish I had Howard's stroller, Luella said. It has a big pocket at the back and we could fill it up, she sighed. I guess pilgrims didn't have any pockets. Neither do belly dancers, I said, but I didn't really care. It was almost enough just to be there in this sea of candy. Of course you had to wonder where it all came from, but it was a lot easier to figure out where it didn't come from, which would be the PTA, or Mr. Crabtree, or the mayor, or, this was Charlie's idea, some kind of Halloween tooth fairy. I guess that sounded good to the first graders because when Mr. Crabtree showed up and yelled, "Where did this all come from?" Missy Reed told him that it came from the Halloween tooth fairy. It was a good thing Missy was a first grader and cute because Mr. Crabtree's ears turned red at the top the way they had when Ollie Herdman wrote the dirty words on Rhoda Gallagher's turtle. There was a lot worse than that, though, and Mr. Crabtree's ears were a lot redder. After all, Rhoda could just pick up her turtle and get it out of sight. And then Mr. Crabtree could pretend that there wasn't even any turtle in the first place, with or without any dirty words on it. But here were a lot of missing kids, and the missing kindergarten slide, and a room full of candy that had to be missing from somewhere. And Mr. Crabtree didn't know how to explain it or who to blame. Of course, neither did anyone else. Who to blame had never been a problem at Woodrow Wilson School. When something happened, you just looked around for Herdman. But on Halloween night at Woodrow Wilson School, there weren't any Herdmans around. Mr. Crabtree could have blamed Alice for the blackout, but by the time Alice lit herself up, there were already kids missing and the boiler room was already full of candy. When Mr. Crabtree canceled the rest of the Halloween party, before anything else happened, he said, the PTA committee got stuck with 14 dozen donuts, so they blamed Mr. Crabtree for that. And Mrs. Wendelkin blamed the Ohio Light and Power Company for what she called Alice's brush with death. But nobody else got blamed for anything. The police chief took charge of the candy in case it turned out to be stolen, but he said he couldn't haul it off to the police station. And Mr. Crabtree said he couldn't leave it in the boiler room, so it all ended up where Halloween candy is supposed to end up with, the kids. The manager of the supermarket said he would never stock that much candy. You stock that much candy, he said, you'll have stale candy. He was right, because that's what we had, stale candy. But you can still count stale candy. You can make piles of stale candy and trade it for your favorite kinds. You can eat stale candy if you want to, and your mother lets you, and if you don't have any braces on. Stale isn't very important at Halloween. What's important at Halloween is the amount. How many, how much, and we had more candy that Halloween than ever before. Or ever again, probably. Never again at Woodrow Wilson School for sure. That's what Mr. Crabtree said when the PTA committee wanted to store all the cardboard bats and fake cobwebs and witch hats and ghost sheets for next year. No. Next year, he said, never again. This meant that we could go back to Halloween as usual, which was what we all really wanted in the first place. Why, my mother said, why do you want to run all over the neighborhood in the dark and try to keep your costume together, and hang on to your trick-or-treat sack and your flashlight, and then, on top of everything else, stay away from the Herdmans? Why? Yes, Charlie said after a second. Yes, what? Mother said. All that, even with the Herdmans, he shrugged. That's what Halloween is supposed to be. Good for you, Charlie, I thought, to know that. After all, once you go down the slide into a room full of candy, you might forget what an ordinary Halloween is like. My father was still trying to get it all straight. Wait a second. You went down a slide into the boiler room, he said. How did you happen to do that? We just followed Boomer, Charlie said. In his gorilla suit, Cecil added. Only I knew it wasn't Boomer. Chapter 13. There were several clues like that, but I guess Mr. Crabtree never could tie them all together. Although he kept calling people into the office to ask what they saw or heard on Halloween night. He mostly asked the wrong people, though, teachers and PTA mothers and a bunch of random kids who honestly couldn't tell him anything he didn't already know. Just all the lights went out and you didn't know where you were, and there were lots of strange noises and spooky stuff, and then a whole ton of candy. Some of those kids also said, "Great Halloween." Mrs. Wendelkin had a lot to say, but it was all about Alice's beautiful but ruined costume that never got to win a prize, and about the leftover donuts that were donated to the welfare department, so you know who got them. The Herdmans. Everybody knew who got them because the Herdman showed up with donuts every day for a week. Mr. Crabtree finally quit trying to figure it out and moved on to Thanksgiving, although every now and then you would see him go down to the boiler room and poke around the corners and shake his head. Danny Phyllis and Stewart Walker helped the janitor. Mr. Sprague moved the kindergarten slide back to the playground, although Mr. Sprague said he could have done it by himself. Those boys could have moved it, he said, if it wasn't so heavy. Boomer's grandmother's fur coat turned up along with my father's washed the car pants in the lost and found box with all the hats and mittens and ugly scarves. Nobody knew how they got there, but everybody recognized the gorilla and the scarecrow because they'd followed one or the other to the candy. My mother checked out Charlie's candy and divided into, okay, not so good, and break your teeth off. And since she wasn't the only mother who did this, everybody had a lot of leftover candy. The fourth grade even went to Mr. Crabtree and offered to glue all the candy together in one big pile and set it up in Woodrow Wilson School as a sculpture. Mr. Crabtree said, "No, thank you." He didn't even look at the picture we drew of it, Charlie said. But Miss Seaworthy gave the whole fourth grade extra credit for creative thinking. Alice collected all her extra credit for the Halloween assignments and then announced that her oral report would be how it feels to be almost electrocuted. At first, Mrs. Hazelwood said, "Our oral reports are intended to provide information," she said, "that we all can use. I don't think this information we want to use. Choose another topic, Alice, of more general interest." Actually, near electrocution, Alice's, was the most interesting topic anyone could think of, and maybe Mrs. Hazelwood realized that. So Alice got to give her report, which was very long and very boring, but who but Alice, you had to wonder, could make electrocution boring? Then came the big surprise. Imogene Herdman began clapping even before Alice was through, pounding and hammering on the kids sitting beside her to do the same. "I couldn't help it," Louis Fraley said. "She had me by the ears and she would have twisted them off. All she said was, 'You better clap or you'll have 2 holes in your head.'" Naturally, Louis clapped along with Imogene's other neighbors, and they kept on clapping until Mrs. Hazelwood finally came to and said, "Very well, that will be enough now." I guess she couldn't believe her own ears and eyes, so that took a while. At recess, I found Imogene and her sack of donuts. They had to be pretty stale by then, but "they'll make good rocks," she said. "You must have really liked Alice's report," I said. She shook her head. "Who cares if her ears sizzled and her toes turned blue?" "Well, that didn't happen. She never said it did. Would have made a better story." "Imogene," I said, "you didn't even listen to her report. So what was all the clapping about?" "We owe her." And she aimed a donut at the back of the building and grinned, sly and sneaky. "She blew out the lights." I guess the Herdmans didn't think of that, or if they did, they couldn't figure out how to do it. And then here came Alice, the Christmas tree, to do it for them. And it was the perfect thing. Mysterious candy, missing kids, secret slide, and then, just like that, a blackout. It was the last straw for Mr. Crabtree, according to my mother. "That poor man," she said. "The whole point of this was to have a Herdman-free Halloween. And you know what he said? He said I would rather have the Herdmans." Well, he did have them. We all had them. The Herdmans were all over Woodrow Wilson School on Halloween night, in Boomer's gorilla suit and my father's pants. They were the Dracula types in long black coats. Ongoing investigation of thefts at Morgan's Cleaners, the newspaper that week said. Winter garments stolen, perhaps by the needy. After all, who but the Herdmans had enough candy to fill up the boiler room after years of taking everyone else's candy? Who but the Herdmans could run around stealing coats from the cleaners and slides from the playground? Who but the Herdmans would spray paint their cat black? And who else's cat would survive that? Who but the Herdmans would think to do those things? "But why?" Luella said, and there were several suggestions. They did it for the donuts was, of course, Alice's idea. They had to get the candy out of the house as if Mrs. Herdman was a normal clean up that mess mother. They just wanted to ruin the PTA Halloween party. "But wait a minute," Boomer said. It was a really great Halloween and the greatest trick or treat ever. So was that why they did it? We could ask them, I said, but nobody jumped to that, including me, because if the Herdmans wanted you to know what they had done, they would tell you. And if they just wanted you to wonder about it, you would just wonder about it and keep your mouth shut. And that is the end of our story. I hope you enjoyed it. I have a review sheet, so I hope you listen very carefully, because after that you can take the AR quiz. And I have a Google document. I think it should be in each one of your classrooms for library. And you can check it over before you start the AR quiz. The quiz number is 80687. It is in, I think, my assignment for the classwork. I did put that number again, if you could see, 80687. It is worth 2 points. 2 points for the new quarter, for second quarter, because AR ended last week. Okay, a review, because it's taken us so long to read. Okay, the best Halloween ever review. Number 1, what did the Herdmans do at Mr. Santoro's pizza parlor? Remember, they swapped guppies or sardines on 6 of his new pizzas. Number 2, what did Mr. Crabtree announce over the PA at school? Halloween would be celebrated inside the school that year. Number 3, Beth's class was lucky because what did Mrs. Hazelwood do? Of course, she made all the Halloween assignments extra credit. What had Leroy Herdman done to Charlie on Parents' Night in second grade? He wallpapered Charlie to the coat room, and we mentioned that a little bit in this, but I think it was on the video last week. Number 5, why did Charlie come home moaning and groaning from the supermarket? All the candy shelves were empty. Number 6, why did Beth think Cecil would offer to be the front end of the lion? The mop he brought to use for the mane was wet and smelly. Number 7, Beth thought that the curse of the Herdmans was taking hold when many of the children were missing in the school. Number 8, and we read that today, all the lights in the school went out. Of course, Alice plugged in her Christmas tree costume into an outlet. Number 9, why did the children go down the slide into the boiler room? They were following someone in a gorilla costume. And number 10, what did the 4th grade offer to do with the leftover candy? And remember, they wanted to glue the pieces together into a sculpture. So now you can take the AR quiz. There's also a vocabulary quiz you can take also. Doesn't give you extra points, but it does increase your vocabulary, what helps you to take standardized tests. So try your hand at that as well. And there's also another video, very short one, because today is Day of the Dead. If you've ever watched the Disney movie called Coco, this would give you a background information and maybe make you understand that movie a little bit better, because it is all about the Day of the Dead. Okay? All right, 4th grade. We should see you next Monday. Bye-bye.